Welcome to our session, Streamlining Oracle Applications, Databases, Everything, Business Critical Workloads on the Software-Defined Data Center. My name is Amanda Blevins. I'm a Chief Technologist in the Office of the CTO. I get to be a generalist, so I can talk about pretty much most all of our products, but my Oracle knowledge does not compare to here. So maybe you can introduce yourself?
Absolutely. So my name is Sudhir and I'm the Staff Solution Architect for VMware. I specialize in Oracle technology. So my background, been doing Oracle databases for 24 years. Started with Oracle 5, 6. I am very old, even though I don't look old, I am very old. So been doing this for a long time. 2012, joined VMware Services, where customer escalations, so on and so forth. I used to help with that. Now, as part of the pre-sales role, I develop collaterals, talk in sessions, talk to you guys, having animated discussions about Oracle licensing, and slide number 3 is going to surprise you, but just hold on to your...
I already ruined the surprise.
Oh, you?
I ruined it, so they already know. All right, so speaking of slides, we have this standard disclaimer that's required for every session. Yesterday I did a session, I talked nothing about technology. They still made me have this in there, so you guys have seen it. This is our big reveal for slide number 3. We'll not be talking about licensing. So here can definitely answer some of those questions afterwards if you buy him lunch, because apparently he hasn't eaten all day. All right, so we're going to go through our agenda really quickly, but basically this session is like a speed dating version of the VMware stack for the software-defined data center. So I'll be touching on the technologies at each layer, starting at the bottom of virtualized infrastructure, and then we'll move up through automation, management, monitoring, DR, and then also hybrid cloud. So we have a lot to cover. And then, really what we hope that you walk away from the session with, a lot of prepositions there. So stringent requirements of BCA workloads. So what does that look like as you're architecting your solution, be able to run things like Oracle databases or high-performing applications? The challenges, of course, and then the value that software-defined data center brings for business-critical workloads, so such as high performance, resiliency, and high availability, security, automation, performance, capacity management, cost insight, and of course, hybrid cloud, because we're pretty good at that. All right, so I'm going to turn to Sudhir to talk about the things about BCAs.
Sure. Thanks. Yeah, so if you look at any business critical application, right, and that does not necessarily have to be the Oracle. That could be the SQLs, the SAPs, the Java, or for all I care, right, that could be an homegrown application that basically puts bread and butter on the table. That's how I define a business critical application. Any business critical application has, a lot more requirements than what's actually shown in the slide here, right? The availability, the reliability, the resilience, right? Faster storage, low latency, I need to have recoverability, I need to have scalability, I need to scale up, I need to scale out, I need security, so on and so forth, right? And Oracle is no different. Of course, Oracle is a different beast that basically requires all of the above. So this slide basically talks about the design methodology. And if you look at the design methodology of virtualizing Oracle databases on VMware SDDC, right? And if you look at every layer of the stack up here, right from gathering the requirements, right? Selling the project to stakeholders because you need somebody to buy in and, loosen up the purse string so you guys can go and do your virtualization project. Understanding the current environment constraints. And why is that important? Because you need to know exactly what your current issues are before you want to move to a virtualization environment. The reason is all the issues would come from your physical environment to the virtual environment if you don't understand them or if you don't do workload management. So for example, this is what I call it as garbage in, garbage out, right? If you don't clean what you have or if you don't set it up correctly, you are having the same issues as you had in your virtualized environment. And that's what is the DB workload measurement. See, the other reason why you want to measure the workload is a simple example. Your CIO walks up to you, your boss walks up to you and say, hey, what is the current IOPS of your database? Can you tell me how much IOPS of your database pushing? And your answer can't be no, I don't know, right? Or I am onboarding a new company, or we are onboarding a lot of new people, we are onboarding a lot of new data, right? And the capacity or the database capacity is going to double, triple, quadruple. Do you think the current infrastructure is good enough to sustain the current workload? All of these questions can only be answered if you know what the workload of the database is, right? And then of course, once you come up with the workload measurement, you have to migrate the databases. See, what happens is, if you migrated from an x86 to an x86 world, It's a simple pipe, right? You don't have to do any block format changing. Now, when you migrate it from Solaris, AIX, HP, there is a block format change, right? MSB to LSB, you have to just reverse the block format, which is not simple. So you need to use the Oracle tools or the Oracle ways of doing it. Of course, licensing, which is the most easiest of all, right? That is something you have to contend with. Yes? No? Ah, come on. Yes. Yes. Design considerations. And of course, you need to put up backup, recovery, high availability DR, monitoring and tuning, and we're going to touch on each and every aspect of these, right? But what I wanted to illustrate, or what I want to just show from this slide is the design methodology or the approach that you would take is exactly the same that you would do on vSphere. There's nothing different that you would do. See, some of the benefits of running Oracle databases on VMware, right? Performance, you have server consolidation, and then again, right, the word server consolidation is loaded, right? Don't ever think when you're running production databases on VMware, it's all about consolidation. No, it's about conservativeness. When you're running non-production databases, absolutely go ahead and consolidate, right? Squeeze every juice out of the lemon for all I care. But when you talk production databases, the same care and nurture that you would give when you run physical production databases on a physical architecture, do the same thing up here. Provisioning, workload management, HA, Oracle RAC. You're able to run Oracle RAC on vSphere. You can run extended Oracle RAC on vSphere or even extended Oracle RAC on vSAN stretch clusters. And now you have the capability of running the same extended Oracle RAC on stretched clusters for VMware Cloud on AWS. Stretched clusters for VMware Cloud on AWS. I got to remember the phrase. Yeah. Business continuity, right? Making sure that you're able to do disaster recovery, so on and so forth.
All right, so we're going to jump into a quick overview of the software-defined data center. Of course, there's physical hardware because software must run on something. And we're VMware and we're not proud, so we let you run on whatever you so choose. But we also have opinionated engineered designs where we will say, if you deploy our software in this way, or if you buy a prepackaged solution from the hardware vendor of your choice, it is a lot more likely to be less of a pain. So above the physical hardware layer, we have compute, storage, and network and security virtualization. So everybody knows vSphere. Hopefully you know vSAN for storage virtualization, and of course NSX for network and security virtualization. And then as we go through this, we'll talk about monitoring and learning, but also log analytics, because that's something that we can integrate into our monitoring analytics platforms. And then, of course, we have the cloud management platform, probably the most important thing about the software-defined data center, because without the cloud management platform, you do not have a private cloud. You just have virtualized infrastructure. And then, of course, the most important thing when it comes to anything about data is protecting it and making sure that it's highly available. So we'll jump through each of these sections as part of this presentation. So we're going to start with the infrastructure layer, the virtualized infrastructure layer. Who here has not used one of these things on the screen or is not familiar with it? I'm going to skip the slide. All right, skipping the slide. It's 4 p.m. We can do what we want, right? All right. But even though those features have been around for a while, every time we release a new version of vSphere, we do a lot of really cool stuff, and a lot of engineering goes into that. So Suhir's going to talk about that.
These are some of the new features for business critical applications, right? And two of the notable features that I will take a bit more time to talk about that is NVMe, the NVDIMMs, the persistent memory, and the PBRDMA. So I have slides that are coming later after, right? But all of these features helps accelerate performance of Oracle databases immensely. So let's skip over this, and then I'm going to focus a bit more on Pmm or persistent memory, and a bit more on RDMA. And the use case for RDMA is Oracle RAC interconnect.
Very good.
That's okay. So when you see these two keywords, right, persistent memory, right? Let's break it down into two keywords. Persistent, which means data is persistent, right? So what that means is it's basically a DIMM, right, with a capacitor and an onboard flash card. So when the power goes off, what happens is the capacitor has enough charge to copy all of the data, all of the buffers from the DIMM to the flash card, and when the power comes back on, the capacitor copies everything back from the NAND or from the flash card back onto the buffer, which means you are there or you are here where you were before the server went down, right? So, and memory, it has memory-like attributes, right? It's memory-like latency, memory-like bandwidth, right? See, what happens is customers have been running these huge, high-performance, IO-intensive, business-critical Oracle workloads on vSphere for a long, long, long period of time, right? So what do these workloads require? Faster storage, low latency, reliability, resiliency, right? So there is a disruptive paradigm shift in this entire data storage technology where persistent memory basically sits between the DRAM and the disk storage. So it sits between the DRAM and the disk storage. So what then happens is vSphere 6.7 has a feature called persistent memory, wherein now I can use that NVDIMM in two different modes, right? Either at the host level or at the virtual machine level, right? So when I use it at the host level, the use case is if I wish to accelerate a legacy OS or a legacy application, right? For example, Oracle 8i, Oracle 7x, they're not supported, right? They're deprecated. But then I got to keep that beast alive till at some point of time there's a migration path from 8x all the way till 11G or 12C, right? So what do I do? The least I can do is I can accelerate the performance. And how do I do that? Just move the VMDK of that redo log file, right, on to the VPMM disk, and that's what the VPMM disk mode is, right? By just simply moving the VMDK on the persistent memory, I'm able to accelerate the performance and keep this thing alive till the migration path comes. So these are for legacy operating system, legacy OSs, right? The other use case is, I got a modern operating system like RHEL 7.4, SLE is Ubuntu, and all of these operating systems, they understand persistent memory. Now how can I use that? The same NVDIMM, I can emulate it inside a virtual machine. So when I scan the bus, I see a /dev/pmm0, which means now I can DAX mount it. I can say mount -o DAX, whatever is the file system in low presto, right? I can put my redo log files on it. What happens? I'm able to accelerate the performance of the redo log files. So I just took the example of a redo log file. I just took the example of Oracle. This is not specific to Oracle. This is not specific to redo log files. So anything that you want to accelerate the performance for, right? You can either use the NVDIMMs either at the host level or the virtual machine level, right? Incidentally, this was the session that I did, yesterday, day before yesterday, don't recollect. And the white paper is released today morning. So I will be updating the slides with the link to the white paper. That has couple more use cases like smart flash cache or potential reduction in Oracle licensing. Trust me, think of it. You have a workload, 14 vCPUs. I'm able to run the workload, right? Now, by moving certain aspects or certain components of the Oracle database on the persistent memory, I'm able to run the same workload with lesser number of vCPUs. And if I can do that across the board, lesser number of vCPUs means lesser number of physical cores, and lesser number of physical cores mean lower Oracle licensing. So there is a potential, that's why I said there's a potential reduction in Oracle licensing. So persistent memory helps immensely Oracle workloads, and doesn't have to be Oracle, any other workload.
We're going to have to strike that from the record. You talked about licensing. Delete it from the recording.
So sorry. She said it's 4 o'clock. I can say anything after 4 o'clock. By accident.
It's just so exciting.
Good. Do you want me to do?
Go ahead.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
So, see what happens is, how many people have heard of RDMA? All right. Remote direct access memory, right? So what happens? Or memory access, sorry. Remote direct memory access. So basically what happens with RDMA is, think of it. If you don't have RDMA, you have two contexts. The user context, the kernel context. And every time you want to do something, copy from the user to the kernel, right? You go through every layer of the stack, right? Gets onto the NIC all the way to the other end, correct? With RDMA, what happens is it copies directly from the buffer. It copies directly from the buffer, which means you are bypassing the operating system, right? You are bypassing all of the layers of the stack, which makes it extremely fast and extremely reliable. Use case, Oracle RAC, right? So what I did was, if you look at Oracle RAC, by default, Oracle uses IPC on the user space, and it uses UDP IP on the kernel space, right? So what we did was we use RDS, Reliable Datagram Socket, right? It's an IPC kind of protocol, right? It has higher bandwidth, lower latency, more reliable than the actual IPC, right? So all I did was I bound the RDS to, right? I bound the RDS to the kernel, the Oracle binaries, the grid infrastructure, and the Oracle binaries, and we use VMware's PV-RDMA library. So we have libraries and we have verbs and we have drivers. By using that along with the Mellanox card, we were able to show accelerated performance of Oracle RAC interconnect. We were able to execute more SQLs, more transactions, the throughput increased, the number of IOPS increased, right? Which means I am now able to improve the performance of an Oracle RAC interconnect. But that's just a use case. Other use cases that come to my mind, RMAN backup to a media server. Or if I have to load a data warehousing, right, or an ODS, right, if I have to do that. Anything that's network intensive, the data goes over the wire, this technology, RDMA technology can help you. Keep in mind, it's a zero copy, which means there's nothing, it's a direct copy from the memory buffer all the way to the NIC. So the NIC is actually doing the work for you.
All right, so now we're going to jump into the storage layer. And the idea of, who uses vSAN today? We got a few. Maybe we'll have more after this week, right? So the idea, what's that? Congratulations. So far, so good, right? You're not there right now, so that's good. So for those of you that maybe haven't looked at it yet or are still looking at it, the general premise of vSAN is that instead of using an external storage array to provide shared storage to your vSphere hosts and therefore your virtual machines, we use the storage that is available within the server to be able to accomplish that. So we've had vSAN around for 5 years now. I didn't realize that till today when I saw a vSAN sticker. It said established 2013. So this is a very highly performant stack because the operations happen right next to the VM or one network hop away. And then also we support things like dedupe, replication, vSAN encryption, as well as the individual VMDK encryption.
We have a lot of collaterals of Oracle on vSAN. So 2015, when we first started, we first came up with an Oracle rack on vSAN, right? We wanted to show that, yes, we wanted to start with the case. That's typically what our customers say. Can you run rack on this? Can you run rack on this? So, we said, let's start with the corner case. Let's run rack on vSAN. So we were able to successfully do that. Then we were able to successfully use DataGuard to protect that Oracle rack cluster. Use RMAN backup for restores and recoveries, right? The second paper that we released was basically using Oracle 12c data warehousing, where we had multi-thread use cases, right, against different features of vSAN. And the intention was to push vSAN and see, what, can we achieve the kind of IOPS, can we achieve the kind of latency that you guys are expecting to come out of vSAN, right? And the third paper was basically running day 2 operations. See, installation, configuration, management, done. What's most important is day 2, backup, recovery, restore, cloning, masking. This is something that an Oracle DBA does probably 60 to 70%. That's a daytime job. So that paper basically went into all of these use cases here, right? Again, session here yesterday at 3:30. The vSAN guy that I work with, Panani is sitting right in the back. Just take a bow. Yeah. So we should be able to answer any of your Oracle on vSAN questions. But yes, any Oracle collateral that you guys are looking for, you should be able to find it in the one-stop shop, which is there at the end of the slide. When we come to it, I'm going to show that to you. And this paper is getting refreshed as well. So 12.2 with the greatest operating system, OEL 7.4, you should be able to see the latest metrics. So.
And one thing to note about hyperconverged infrastructure, because a lot of companies use that term, and there are other companies that can leverage our hypervisor and then provide their own virtualized storage. Remember that we get to cheat because we own the kernel. Right, so anybody else that's doing hyperconverged infrastructure and virtualized storage, they are going to have a performance bottleneck because there's going to be some sort of appliance that they need to route all storage operations through. So just something to think about as you're evaluating your different solutions. All right, so somebody asked me if there's going to be a lot of slides about NSX, and I told him maybe 2 or 3. So who uses NSX? Like my vSAN people and a few more, so that's cool. So NSX is our virtualized network and security platform. Not only does it run on vSphere, but you can also run it on other vSphere environments in the public cloud. But you can also run it on native AWS or native Azure or containers on bare metal or bare metal servers. So the purpose of NSX is to provide you a single portal and a single control point for all of your network configuration and all of your security configuration. If you have security teams that say, Palo Alto is my favorite firewall, or I want to use this load balancer, that is okay, because NSX is also an automation management platform, and so we have over 100 partners that we work with to be able to integrate either their IDS, IPS tools or security tools, load balancers, and other things. The other thing that I want to draw your attention to is that because NSX is all software, it makes it a lot easier to automate. So we'll get into the section around creating blueprints and then deploying an entire application stack or deploying Oracle RAC or databases through Vrealize automation. But because, again, we get to cheat, because we own VRA and we also own NSX, we have built tight integrations into that. So when you deploy an entire application stack, you deploy a database, you deploy a virtual machine, you deploy something to a public cloud, we include the automation of the network and security rules. So that way you do not need to call out to another team through a ticket or an email or wait for a change control or anything like that. You can have your entire application stack deployed at that time. So when folks are trying to troubleshoot things, generally you need to know the path that your network is taking, that your packets are taken through your network. So there's something called Network Insight, which is available as an on-prem or in the cloud SaaS solution. So this will fully map the path of your traffic from anything in your physical data center to the cloud provider of your choice. So a lot of people who are going to use NSX and are thinking about micro-segmenting, which is separating applications from each other, generally like to know what's happening in their data center before they make these decisions and then get Network Insight to do that traffic mapping. Also, people that are looking to go hybrid cloud or public cloud, if you're going to separate applications, you have to think about the laws of physics, so it's good to understand what that network traffic looks like. Also, from our network and security team, we have something called App Defense. Pat talked about it day one, where we have the new vSphere Platinum SKU, but I'm not in sales, so I don't know anything about SKUs. But what I can tell you is that App Defense, like he says, is about protecting the known good. So the idea is that we look at the virtual machine and you say, these 12 processes on this virtual machine are supposed to be running. That way we know that if something else shows up, it should not be running. And so that way you can call things like NSX or your automation tools and say, segregate this virtual machine, turn it off, get rid of it, whatever that might be. So that's good for security, and that's also good for badly behaved developers that just put stuff in production. So something to think about there. But let's get into the Oracle use case.
So I won't take much time on the slide up here. I'm not a networking expert, more of an Oracle guy, but basically we used NSX when we had to stretch an Oracle rack across metro distances, right? So by doing that, we don't have to set up subnets. It's the same subnet. So no issues with either the public, the private, the VIPs, the scan, and so on and so forth. So everything was very seamless to me. I'm the dumb app guy with no networking knowledge. Basically, as a network guy, can you please set up NSX for me? And everything became so transparent to me, right? So I was able to do it. So this was a VMworld 2016 session that we ran. Should be available to you guys. Again, my apologies. Not a networking guy, so I can't speak much to the slide here.
Yeah, so one thing I do want to say is that the nice thing about NSX is you can extend a subnet without extending layer 2. So that's why this is so powerful. So you don't have to do uncomfortable, awkward network things to be able to run similar workloads in different data centers, whether it's across a rack, a cluster, or even for a DR situation. All right, so do our polls work?
It does. I fixed it.
All right,
or I had
so
them
we are
fix it.
also tech support. So please let us know where you run your Oracle stuff. So you can either do this on your computer by that website or tablet or phone, or we let you text VMworld 2018 to the number 22333 and then make your selection. So really we're wondering if you virtualize Oracle or not. And then if you do you use vSphere, do you use vSAN, do you use NSX, do you use some combination of that? Yes, I like it. What's that? We are still physical. We'll call that physical. Just throw it in there so our pool people can be happy with some data, if you don't mind.
Okay.
This is real time, folks.
I'm just waiting for NSX
we
to
can
go
take bets or something. I mean, make this more exciting.
Just waiting for
It
NSX
is
to go.
Vegas.
Yeah.
Well, we had our NSX people, but they must not be using it with Oracle yet. All right. Well, thank you very much. We will continue. There will be a few more of these, so please add in your stats as we get there. So next we're going to talk about high availability and disaster recovery. And really that comes down to business continuity. So we have a lot of capabilities around that at VMware. But first we're going to talk specifically about the rack solution.
Sure. See, when we look at Oracle Rack, right, it's basically an HA solution. And the first thing the customers ask me is rack on rack. Now, why do you want to run Oracle Rack on vSphere? Right? It's one clustering software on another clustering environment, right? Don't they impede with each other? Don't they collide with each other? You know what? Actually, they complement each other very well. The reason is this. And then forget VMware for a moment. Let me ask you this question, right? 2-node Oracle Rack running on physical architecture. Workload is X. And I think I give this example in many sessions. The workload is X. And let's say you use Oracle Rack services, right? So which means you logically bifurcate your data into 2 segments, right? X by 2 and X by 2. So you have 2 nodes running the Oracle Rack, the instances. What happens if one physical node goes down? What's your workload? Is it X by 2 or is it X? It's still X. That doesn't change. What happens to your business SLAs? It's not SLA by 2, it's still SLAs. What happened to your RTOs and RPOs? It's still the same. So all I'm trying to say is nothing changes, right? When an Oracle Rack physical server goes down, right? You still have to deliver the same amount of SLAs, you still have to deliver the same RTO, RPO. What if you were running in VMware and we automagically bring up your virtual machine on another ESXi server, in which case you're still able to meet your SLAs, meet your goals, keep your manager happy, and probably get a fat bonus, right? That's Oracle Rack on Rack for you. Right? See, the other thing is, the other question customers usually ask us is, Oracle Rack, is it supported on VMware? Absolutely, right? 249.212.1. See? Wake me up in the middle of the night and ask me the meddling note and I'll tell you 249.212.1, right? Oracle Rack 11.202 is supported since November 8, 2010. Yes, Rack is supported. Single instance databases are supported on VMware. Do we have customers running Rack on vSphere? Yes. Do you have customers running extended Oracle Rack on vSphere? Yes. Do you have customers running Oracle Rack on vSAN? Yes. How about extended vSAN? Yes. How about in the cloud? Yes. And there are slides where I'll show you where we do have customers doing. So Oracle Rack is supported and runs on VMware SDDC, be that vSphere, be that vSAN, or VMware Cloud on AWS. The other thing, quick thing before I move ahead is, the other question that we get is there something special that you need to do if you have to run Oracle Rack on VMware SDDC? No. The only thing that you need to do is shut up shared devices, right? Like you would do on a physical architecture. And once you do that, if you ask me what are the next steps, I'll just point you to oracle.com. I'll just say go to oracle.com documentation, right? Go to 11gr2 or go to 12.2, read all these steps and just follow it, because that's it. It's as easy as that. There's nothing special that you need to do to keep Rack running on vSphere.
Very good. All right, Site Recovery Manager. Who's a fan? It's only like 4 fans? Maybe nobody else has seen it before. So Site Recovery Manager, I've been at VMware 8.5 years, and before I joined VMware, I was always where you guys are sitting as a customer, so server admin, storage admin, technical architect, enterprise architect, and I was responsible for BCDR, which is the most fun thing on the planet, right? And testing is always so easy. And about the time that I joined VMware, we introduced this technology called Site Recovery Manager. And the concept is that instead of having to do disaster protection for each individual application or operating system or things like that, we will handle the replication for you. Either you can use our vSphere replication or you can use your storage array replication of choice. And Site Recovery Manager is a workflow manager. So that way you can say, these are my protection groups. And so you'll set it up by application. You'll probably say, my core services are most important. And you'll have your multiple protection groups, which would represent those applications or even an entire data center. And then you set up your recovery groups, which shows what order your protection groups will come up in, the order of the virtual machines within those protection groups, and also the order in which the entire data center will come online. So Site Recovery Manager works very well with NSX because there's no re-IPing required. If you choose to re-IP because you don't have NSX or you just want to, then we also support that. Site Recovery Manager will re-IP the virtual machine as it comes online. So when you click the button to fail over because you have a disaster or because you're doing a data center migration or because you test every other day because it is that easy with SRM, we will go through the workflow that you created And then we can also call out to anything physical. We can call any script. We can even pause it to say, Amanda needs to go walk in the data center and look at a blinking light and then come back in and say continue. There's a question? So HCX, like moving it to the cloud? Yeah. So HCX is specific to moving it to the cloud, so we make it a little confusing because we have Site Recovery Manager, which is solely on-prem. We have SRM as a service, or what we call DR as a service for the VMware Cloud and AWS solution, which is basically SRM off-prem. And then it can tie into SRM on-prem, whereas HCX is more of a, I need to get workloads there, but I don't necessarily need the entire workflow scheduling around it that SRM provides. So that being said, hey, we integrate with Oracle stuff.
Absolutely. So far we saw Oracle databases on VMware SDDC, we saw HA, right? All that. And another aspect, an important aspect to any workload is disaster recovery, right? But even before we get into this whole case study here, any replication can be done in 3 levels. Right? You have app level replication, then you have VM level replication, and then you have storage level replication, right? One of the app level replication example for Oracle is Data Guard, Golden Gate, DB Visit, so whatever you have out there. vSphere replication, and then you have storage-based replication like Time Finder, SRDF, so on and so forth. The question, when you ask an app guy like me what SRM is, the way I describe SRM is it's that black book or the red book when you walk into the data center, right? I don't know how many of you guys have actually walked into the data center, because I used to do that when I used to manage EMC storage. But once you walk in, it says, after this step, do this step, then do this step, then do this step, then do this step. So basically, it's a workflow orchestrator. Does it replicate anything for you? No. Does it use anything for replication? Absolutely, yes. Can it work with Data Guard? Yes. Who does the replication? Data Guard. So what does SRM do then? Question, what does SRM do? See, what happens is, think of it. If you have a primary database and if you have a standby database, Data Guard, right? And then let's say you're sending the redo over the wires, right? Site A goes down, site B is up. Somebody needs to go and change the mode of the database from standby to primary. Someone has to do it, and the someone could be you. If it is one database, oh, that's okay. If it's 100, not a problem. What's if it's 1,000? Are you going to run the same command 10,000 times, 1,000 times? Well, I'm going to script it. You still have to run the script 1,000 times, right? Well, how can I make life easy for the DBAs? Can I automate it? Absolutely, yes. So this is what the case study was. So on a post power on of any virtual machine, all we did was we embedded a script. And we said this script will go log on to every standby database, right? And run a set of commands. Those commands would be alter database, commit to switchover from standby to primary, alter database open, voila. And this, I was able to do it 1,000 times. It saved me a lot of time. So, you're in a time crunch when you have a disaster. And the last thing you want to know is your manager or CIO breathing down your back. This actually saves you a lot of time. So this is just one use case. There are a lot more automation use cases that you can use with SRM.
All right, FT. So have you guys used FT before? So FT stands for fault tolerance. Like I said, I was a customer before I joined VMware. So 8-something years ago, my Oracle architect came to me and I'm like, hey, look, there's this FT thing. You can maybe do some less work. And he's like, whatever. It's not Oracle. It's not good. VMware just released it. This was vSphere version 4. It was still the beta that I was in. And so I made him test. I didn't make him test it. He chose to test it. And he was actually very, very pleased with the fact that he lost almost 0 performance from his Oracle operations when FT was turned on. And that was version 4.0, 8.5 years ago. So imagine what you can do today. And it's nice to point out that FT will have, or SRM will have awareness of your FT workloads to be able to understand that for the entire DR scenario. Polls. You didn't know this was an interactive session where you had to do things, did you? You're like, 4 p.m. I can just nap in there. It's nice and cool. Should have brought in some popsicles. All right, so the question is, what software do you use for Oracle Disaster Recovery? We have RAC, Site Recovery Manager, RAC and SRM combined. Zerto, hopefully no one chooses that one. Other, something that we did not list. Some people are still working on it, and somebody is super lucky if you choose G because you say none.
Right.
or really scared.
So even though this is a poll, there is something wrong here. I have to point it out.
Go for it.
Look at the very first one, Oracle RAC. Oracle RAC is not DR, it's HA. So even though, probably it's my mistake, I must have just come up with a question, but no. So RAC is HA, DR is data card. And never the twain shall they meet. East is east and west is west, and never the twain shall meet. That's it. RAC is RAC and DR is DR, and they're not the same.
So we'll say that A says rack and or data guard.
Yes.
We'll do that.
Yeah.
Cool, thank you so much for your responses. All right, now we're jumping into automation. This is the fun stuff. Who uses VRA for anything today? VRA stands for Virtualized Automation. Ah, we're getting some more numbers. So I apologize if I or Sudhir uses too many abbreviations. We do that at VMware. We actually have a wiki internally called WTF, where you can type in an abbreviation. It stands for what is the definition. You can type in an abbreviation and see what that really relates to. So I apologize if I use it too much, but it definitely cuts down time. So Virtualized Automation is our cloud management platform, an overall orchestration platform where we don't necessarily make you get rid of what you do today, but we highly suggest that you don't use just random scripts to do things, do pieces and parts, because you don't have any insight into how successful those scripts were. And you don't have anything to glue that together. So think of our cloud management platform as something that will envelop anything. So if you use Puppet Chef, Jenkins, anything else there, we can include those things in the blueprints that we create. But we've spent many, many years creating an amazing GUI to be able to make this happen. And we also have full YAML support for any of the blueprints that you make. And like I mentioned before, you will include things like your network configuration when you deploy the entire application and database. You include things like calling out to your CMDB, calling out to your global DNS, calling out to your backup teams, calling out to your monitoring team. So as you deploy the entire blueprint, the entire application, this is all automated for you. This is how, when we implemented this technology at VMware, we went from 30-something people in 6 weeks to deploy an application to 2 people in 1 hour. So you can see that our Virtualized Automation, of course, you need a CLI and API to make anybody happy that is not a Windows person these days, and even some Windows people. And so we support integrations to IaaS. That could be your current environment, a new vSphere environment that you build. It could be Amazon native. It could be our VMware Cloud on Amazon. It could be Azure. It could be Google. It could be IBM. It could be anything really of your choice. I've seen someone brew coffee with a wireless coffee maker using Virtualized Automation X as a service. So definitely doesn't require VMware to function well, but we certainly do it pretty well. Also supports containers, and we're going to talk about database as a service. So I can jump into that.
Sure. See, one of the technical reasons why people use DB as a service is, you have a big landscape, right? Or let's say you're a service provider, and then you have to churn out these databases on a regular basis for customers, right? See, what happens is when you start looking at Oracle RAC, it has too many moving parts. You have shared storage, shared network, you have the IP addresses, the public, the private, the scan, the VIP, the HAIP, right? And then you have to make sure the load balancing is set up. You need to set up TAP, you need to set up OCI, and there are so many abbreviations I'm hitting you guys with, right? And then once you start talking to a database and say, can we do a deployment of Oracle RAC, right? It's a difficult beast to do that, right? The other thing is, in order to set up an Oracle RAC, or in order to have that care and nurture, you need a RAC DB. You just can't have an Oracle guy who just walks in and says, I can take care of Oracle RAC. It's a specialized piece of software, right? So you require Oracle DB involvement in every deployment. That's why typically people shy away. They say, it's easy for me to automate standalone databases, easy for me to do this, I'm going to avoid, right, automating Oracle RAC. But then all hope is not lost. So what we have done so far is we have now we come up with a product, right? Using VRA, we are able to deploy a standalone database or Oracle RAC of your choice with as many number of nodes as you want. So theoretical limit of Oracle RAC on any architecture is 100, right? So you can go from 2 to 100, right? So basically what happens is all you have to do is you've got to say, this is the cluster name I have, this is the name of the database, these are my ASM instances, right? These are the public, private, VIP, all the network IP addresses. this is the name I want to give to the host, and I'm going to go click, and I'm going to go drink the coffee that VRA sent that message to, the coffee that was brewing that Amanda spoke about, and once I come back, I'll have a 2-node, 3-node, 4-node Oracle rack ready to go, right? So that's the first use case. Second use case that we're working on is cloning single instance databases, cloning Oracle rack. The other one is also data masking. So not everything is just about cloning, right? So if, let's say, for example, you work for a credit card company, right? You have SSNs, you have credit card, mother's maiden name, you have your last name, first name. You want to clean the data, you want to cleanse it before you give it off to your QA or your development team for them to, test new software. So that's what that is. If you have to do any kind of metering, any kind of reporting and decommissioning. So all of the use cases that we're working on, hopefully by the end of the year, it should be available for customers to use, right? So stay tuned.
We had a question in the aisle real quick.
If you don't mind, can you just speak? No. Absolutely.
So we have two tools that we're using already, Atlas, and then OEM. The DBAs like to do this with OEM. So, and then if you add VRA on top, I think VRA is a good direction, but I don't know how we would deal with the struggle between the DBAs wanting to do OEM versus...
Right. See, what happens is with DBAs wanting to do OEM, right? And with VRA here, so VRA is able to take care of everything right from the container all the way in the app. Where the DBAs come is, yes, I can automate the Oracle database, but then I need somebody to build the container for me, right? So all I'm saying is, I'm going to do the whole thing for you. I'm going to build the container right from scratch, and all you just have to give me is, give me a template, give me a seed, and from the seed, I'll spawn a couple of virtual machines. I'll make sure it's connected to the right port group. I'll make sure it's connected to the right public interface. I'll make sure that the operating system is installed. I'll make sure all the security patches are installed, which means I'm automating everything that any IT organization does, along with installing the database. With OEM, it just looks at the Oracle world, right? I mean, there have been customers who even came and asked me this, can VRA talk to OEM to do this? I'm like, why do you need one automation tool to talk to another automation tool to do this, what this guy can actually do in the very first place? Waste of time. Can you technically do it? Absolutely. Would anybody practically do it? No.
My question, maybe user wants to work, but is the blueprint/workflow, is this already been built so that you can kind of just work off of it and modify it for your work?
Absolutely. It's customizable.
It's already in automation. Or is it like something you can download?
So let's get to the next slide so you can answer his question about how you've built this.
Oh, how did we build it?
Yes.
So
yeah. So how would he use it in his environment?
Yes, I'm not a VRA expert. I'm the Oracle geek here, right? So with whatever little knowledge I have, right, you use the intelligent scripting manager in VRA, right, and you should be able to download the blueprint, change it. All of the scripts are customizable. So all the scripts that are there that actually runs off is highly customizable. So you don't have to go with the default names that I came up with, right? You can go with whatever you want. You can either enter the inputs on the command prompt, right, to feed it, or you can even change it in the GUI. But I don't know if I'm answering your question, and maybe we can take this offline.
I think that part more was, this blueprint's already out there, so like in my organization, I can show it to my Oracle database guys to show.
Yes,
How it works.
it's kind of out there. It's out there, and we just have to put a little more final touches to that. The entire product should be ready for customers to use, right, by end of this year. Yeah. But then again, if you have any other questions, please come talk to me after the session.
We
I saw that you had data masking on the Oracle database. Now the question I have is, how long does that take? And segue to the other type of database that I have, like SAP HANA, is that a feature that we can use as well on the database data masking?
First thing, so the data masking tool that we are using is specific to Oracle, right? So you cannot use it for SAP HANA or for SQL. Second, how much time does it take? It depends. Classic consultant answer. It depends on the type of data you have, right? And it depends upon the volume of data. If you just have a couple of gigabytes of database, easy to clean it, right? You just run a DBMS package, which is basically a subprogram, and all it does is goes through all the columns, goes through all the data, cleans it out. Well, if you have a 20 terabyte database or 30 terabyte database that you provision, right? Now it has to go through all of the tables, all of the columns to make sure it does what you want it to do. So again, it depends upon the size of the database and the kind of firepower you have on a server. Usually it doesn't take much time because you will not be masking out every column. It's just certain columns will mask out, right? No, we're just talking hours. We're just talking minutes to hours. And people typically what they do is, for example, right, if they have an employee ID, they may also have a surrogate key that goes on the SSN. So when you're doing a data masking, it kind of goes fast because it goes off the index, right? So it will be faster. How fast it is, a lot of factors, the size, the size of the virtual machine, the kind of firepower that you have. Did I answer? Okay. All right.
We had a question over there on the side too.
See, we're doing that with all-flash storage, and with all-flash storage, we were able to mask stuff in 170 gig in a couple of seconds.
Oh.
That was down from quite a bit more than that on spinning storage. So there's a lot of stuff like that.
Good.
Very
Thank you.
good, thank you. All right, so
Before
let's
this one?
let's jump into, so when your end user does get into, so this is something that you guys would set up, your automation team would set up, but when your end user gets into the interface, it is just a service catalog. They're just going to go in there and say, deploy this thing that you've made available to them. There's role-based access control. There are very few things that you might make them type in. You might have them type in nothing. But you might give them the options to size it, or maybe you make them type in the networking, or maybe you figure that out on the back end. But again, something like CPU or RAM, you can hard set. You can give them the option to make their own choices. You can give them the option to make their own choices, and if they choose too large, there could be a governance queue where an email is sent off to somebody to approve something where they want 32 CPUs. All right, another poll. Oops, I can't even use my own polling tool. All right, here we go. Do you deploy Oracle databases with VRA today? Yes or no?
10 minutes.
What?
10 minutes.
10 minutes. You guys don't want to stay here all night?
10 minutes
This
before the
is
party.
so much better than the party. All right, so we got some work to do. All right, thank you. All right, second poll. If you, deploy some type of databases with VRA, please let us know. Cool. Thank you so much for answering these questions. They're very helpful. We should have brought alcohol in.
We will have alcohol after the session.
Next.
She's going to pay for it.
Absolutely. All right, so we're going to jump through a couple things pretty quickly because I know we have some new content we want to cover at the end around hybrid cloud. But when it comes to performance and capacity management, we have an entire suite of solutions. Virtualize operations, something called Log Insight. We have Wavefront, which is a SaaS solution. Of course, we have the Network Insight tool that I spoke of earlier. We have Vrealize Business for on-prem costing. You saw that we purchased Cloud Health, or are in the middle of purchasing Cloud Health. So we have many, many solutions, but the idea is that we want to give you one-stop shop to be able to see your performance capacity management, see the risks that you have against rules that you have set up in your environment, the topology, where's my network traffic going. I can do log analytics, and not only can I do all of these things, but all of those tools talk to each other because, again, we get to cheat because we made them. So we talked a bit about Vrealize automation and where somebody can deploy something. Well, we use Virtualize operations to understand the landscape of where these workloads are going, so we can make recommendations or force VRA to put workloads in different clusters or different data centers or different clouds based on the utilization in those environments. And then we can also expose some of this information to your self-service customers that want to come in and do things so they can be good corporate citizens around, it might cost more to go to this location because we're providing more services, for example. So we have definitely updated the Virtualize operations GUI, and we continue to do that, and we continue to structure in a way that we hope that it is intuitive as you come in. But generally, we have the categories of performance capacity, troubleshooting, and configuration. And I want to point out that Virtualize Operations is not a monitoring tool, it's an analytics engine. So the first data point, or the first data source that it brings in is vCenter, and vCenter has over 300 metrics per virtual machine and over 300 metrics per host. So that means we have a lot of data there already, but really you want to connect up as much as you can to your environment so we can tell you root cause. So if we know everything about your hardware, about your virtual infrastructure, about your applications, about your database, about your user performance, well then we can look at all of that and say, based on everything that's happening right now, we think maybe your storage latency is an issue, or this database operation is an issue. So that way it's not 20 people on a call trying to figure it out for 24 hours. you're pointed in a certain direction, you can hopefully solve that a lot sooner. And then as we see, because it's an analytics engine and it understands trends over time, we have the opportunity to say, hey, we've seen this enough, we've seen something like this happen before, you might have some type of outage or issue because of that. So we also have partnerships with others that create specific dashboards for Oracle. We have a plugin from a company called Blue Medora. So this way you can specifically talk to your Oracle databases and understand what are all my Oracle metrics and operations and how is this affecting. So then you can align this towards your infrastructure statistics, your application statistics, and go from there. So I know Suhir spends a lot of time helping people troubleshoot with this tool. All right, so, my polls are killing me. All right, so we'll just spend a little minute here. Hopefully you use Vrealize operations, or you might be interested in using it, but if you use it, tell us what you monitor with it. Or if you don't, just tell us you don't use it. All right, so everybody needs the Oracle plugin is what I see.
You guys do need the Oracle plugin. So have you guys heard of Blue Medora? So they had the booth, so they had the booth on the exhibition floor. So quick 30 seconds, right? So basically Blue Medora makes two kinds of adapters. Adapters for single instance and adapters for OEM. So if you want to log on to the mothership to find out what the satellite databases are doing, that's one way. Or if you just want to buy single instance licenses, you could do that too, right? But case in point being, you're able to get metrics from the database stack as well, right? And put it along with the VMs, the metrics from the VM layer, storage, fabric, so on and so forth. Because at the end of the day, when there's an issue, the last thing you want is finger pointing. Everybody's been through that. Oh, it's not my problem, it's the storage. No, it's a VMware guy, networking guy, the server guy, database. Oh, it's the app guy. Oh, it's the business guys, right? That's the last thing you want. So this tool helps alleviating all of that issues, right? It's a very effective tool, and anytime we do any kind of services, the first thing that I do, I ask this question: do you guys have Virtualized ops or VR ops? Right? And they say yes, fine. Let's put this plugin. Let's start looking at it. So that's the first point that I start looking at when I start troubleshooting stuff.
Very good. So we talked about a lot of solutions. These are all things that you could deploy by yourselves, or we have something called a VMware validated design. If you like to read 400-page white papers, where we tell you exactly how to deploy everything that we talked about today and all the commands you need to run. Or we make it very easy with something called Cloud Foundation. So Cloud Foundation is our opinionated, engineered design as to how these components, through the software-defined infrastructure, management monitoring, log analysis, costing, can be deployed automatically. So we provide this platform to our hardware partners, and our hardware partners can implement it on the hardware of their choice. So it could be HP, it could be Dell, it could be an integrator that you use to do white boxes. But as you add more components, the lifecycle management of this gets really hard. So if you've ever upgraded vSphere, it probably took you more than an hour. So imagine trying to upgrade vSphere, NSX, vSAN. It might take you more than 2 hours. So we've put together a Cloud Foundation where you can download a pack to be able to update those at the time in which we say we have validated this, this all works together, we've tested, it's engineered. Since we built Cloud Foundation, we also figured out, hey, well now we can run workloads in Amazon's data centers, have them take care of the hardware, and we will run the software. So that's what our relationship is with Amazon for VMware Cloud and AWS. They provide the hardware, we are running a version of Cloud Foundation up there, we manage it, you guys get access to the vCenter, and you are off and running. We also provide back-end access to the native AWS services, so you don't have to pay egress charges, which is always nice. But also because it's a high-speed engineered backend, you can certainly save costs and raise your performance. So that's the overall view of Cloud Foundation, VMware Cloud and AWS. So you're going to go through how that really helps out with the Oracle workloads.
Sure, but even before I get started, a quick question. How many people think VMware Cloud on AWS really equals running our secret sauce on native EC2? So, how many people really think VMware Cloud on AWS equals or is running whatever we are running, our secret sauce, right, which is vSphere, vSAN on native EC2? No, it's not. Because most of the customers I spoke to during our MTEs, couple of sessions, they came up and said, okay, how come you guys are running a hypervisor on top of the hypervisor? No, it's basically the Amazon bare metal server. So think of it, right? Your data center, if I could just scoop up your data center, right? Just scoop up your vSAN servers, right? With NSX, load it on the back of my truck, and if I can drive all the way as fast as I can to Oregon East and dump it there, that's VMware Cloud on AWS. I'm oversimplifying it, but it is bare metal on which we install vSAN, NSX, and Cloud Foundation Suite, right? So this is the point. So last 2017, we were able to demonstrate how we can run Oracle RAC on VMware Cloud on AWS. So basically, Oracle RAC ran on VMware Cloud on AWS, and we were able to use applications running on the EC2 side through ENI. So you can run an app, which is here is basically Elastic Beanstalk or Django Python. It's just an app. I mean, you can run another app if you wish to. And that app actually talks to the database through the ENI, which is the Elastic Network interface, right? To query data or to do whatever you want to. So that goes back to what Amanda was saying. You can use native Amazon services, right, to connect to your VMware Cloud on AWS, right? And you do that too. So the other thing is migrating Oracle workloads from on-premise to the cloud, right? So let's split it into two: migrating standalone databases and migrating Oracle RAC from on-premise to the cloud, right? And now that we know cloud, VMware Cloud on AWS is basically vSAN for storage, right? This is as simple as that. If you have to migrate it from on-prem, one on-prem to the other, what would you do? I mean, you just say right-click, you would say migrate, choose compute and storage, right? You'll basically pick up the data store that you want to move stuff to, and you'll say finish and probably go for a cup of coffee. This is as simple as that, right? The reason why I picked L2 VPN is I wanted to keep the same networking address between on-prem and the cloud. So we set up L2 VPN and L3 IPsec tunnel, right? And all I said was pick L2 VPN because I don't want my IP addresses to change in the cloud. It's as easy as that. And basically the same steps are followed when migrating back to on-prem from the cloud. So you can read more about it in the blog. Plus there's a demo that actually shows that this is not smoke and mirrors. This actually happens. So the other thing is, what if I have to move an Oracle RAC database to the cloud? And that was my session Monday, right? Where I was able to show how we can move an Oracle RAC cluster from on-prem to the cloud, right? And I don't know if you have time to go through this, but talk to me after the session and I can go a bit more detail into that. I really want to cover the rest of the slides here, right? The feature that I would like to touch upon a bit is extended stretch clusters for VMware Cloud on AWS. See, all along we had VMware Cloud on AWS in AAZ, in an availability zone within a data center, right? Now we have the capability of stretching the same vSAN cluster across two data centers, across two availability zones in the same region, right? That's what stretch clusters for VMware Cloud on AWS is. What's the use case? Oracle RAC. I can extend an Oracle RAC beyond metro distance. I can extend an Oracle RAC across data centers. But what does that give me? Site level high availability. So whatever features that I could get by running Oracle RAC within a data center, now I can get it across data centers. Site level high availability. If I want to do maintenance on one site, all I have to do is kick those VMs over there, right? Do the maintenance on this site, bring it back up here, voila, I'm good to go, right? What if I had to do any kind of workload balancing, any kind of workload mobility? All of the things that you can do, Oracle RAC on a traditional data center, now you can do it across data centers. So now you have added high availability when you go across AZ. So that's the stretch clusters for VMware Cloud on AWS. The key thing to keep in mind, whether it's an Oracle RAC, traditional or extended, VM anti-affinity rules. You want to have VM anti-affinity rules to make sure these two virtual machines of the Oracle RAC does not land on the same ESXi server, or else what good is AHA? So you don't have an HA at all, right? But all of these, the migrating of single instance databases, migrating of Oracle RAC clusters, and all of these is documented in a white paper. I released it today morning. So I will be updating the slides. So when you guys download it 2 weeks from now, you should have the white paper as well. And that's the white paper, but the URL is missing, so I'll make sure it's there. And
I think this is our last pull.
So the last
We're not going to make you do any more work after this. Thank you. Oh, definitely not.
good, I like it.
I like it. Very good.
Thank you. You're making us more and more happy by saying this is definitely not going.
Yeah, this is all definitely not. There'd be some conversations afterwards. We wouldn't let you go. All right, so let's conclude this, right? So we've done this 58-minute overview of the software-defined data center. We have an entire conference dedicated to that, which ends tomorrow, and we have a ton more content that you can certainly learn. But thank you very much for spending time listening to that. And again, hopefully you agree, at least a high level, that we can provide the high performance, resiliency, automation, cost insight, performance capacity management, security, and of course, hybrid cloud to you. So Sud here writes a lot. So we have a lot of good, useful collateral from an Oracle perspective. I'll let you take some pictures there, but I think it'd be nice so that they can download this and just click on it rather than trying to type it out. But that's definitely available. And then I talked about those VMware validated designs, the VVDs. Do you want me to go back so you can take a picture? Yeah, we'll go back. So we talked about this VMware validated designs as white papers that we put together based on use case of what you want to accomplish, whether you want to automate, whether you want to secure, or if you want to do the entire software-defined data center, so you can go to our VVDs to be able to do that. Sweet. Or if you do not want to run a bunch of commands, well, then you can just purchase Cloud Foundation when you are ready to use vSphere, vSAN, and Nsx, and have us take care of all the lifecycle management. And we also call out to the lifecycle management of the Vrealize suite, so you don't even need to worry about deploying that and maintaining that either. And you can find us on Twitter, or you can find us around the conference. Look for my shoes. Look for this guy at our booth.
Look for the guy limping around. Okay,
Yeah, he has an ankle thing.
I have an ankle thing, so yeah.
But I'll probably be limping soon with all these steps. But yeah, find us on Twitter, and we'd love to hear more about it. This guy writes a lot of books and knows things, so he also has a
I got a
blog.
copy of the book. If anybody's interested, taking it, please.
He does want to pack it. And if you're still interested, give him your card, and he'll get you another one.
Yes. Please let me know if you guys need copies, and I can ship it to you.
But more importantly, we want to release you so you can go rest your brain a bit, have some fun at the party, have a nice dinner, enjoy the rest of your conference, and thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.